Hello everyone and welcome to Columbia Business School Executive Education. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jason Belland. I'm here with Professor Bernd Schmitt. We're coming to you live from the Columbia campus here in New York City, and we're so excited that you decided to join us for today's webinar, How to Lead Your Brand in Today's Turbulent Environment. Before we get started with the session, I do want to let you know about one of our new programs coming up here at Executive Education, Brand Leadership, Strategy, Management, and Performance. It's directed by Professor Bernd Schmitt, who's with me today, and his colleague, Professor Michelle Pham, both from the Center on Brand Leadership here at Columbia. It's a really exciting new program, and it's coming up in November 3rd through 5th, 2014. It's a 3-day program right here on the Columbia campus. Today's topic is really at the center of that program, and we'll give you a sense of what to expect in terms of some of the thought leadership coming out of Columbia. So we encourage you really to participate in today's conversation, and then give some thought to how this might fit into your own professional development goals, and connect with us as we help you along that path. As we are here today, I see there's a good number of participants coming into the room, and really we do have participants from all over the globe, and that's really a great example of the kind of participation that we have in our executive programs. So with all of that diversity, we also get a lot of diversity of questions and thought. And I want you to really take this opportunity to ask questions in the chat as you hear things that are interesting to you. Talk with each other and talk with us so that we can make this a very rich and engaging experience over the next 30 minutes. So I encourage you to use the chat. And if any of you are interested now, you can certainly just tell us where you're from and say hello, introduce yourselves. It's always good to see a great mix of folks connecting with us from around the world for these online events. So again, the program is Brand Leadership, Strategy, Management, and Performance. I'm really talking to you about the knowledge, skills, and tools that you need to lead your brand for impact in today's global and digital marketplace. It's led by my colleague, Professor Bernd Schmitt. Professor Schmitt, it's always a pleasure to spend time with you. Thank you so much for being here with us this afternoon.
Jason, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm also very excited about this program, Brand Leadership, that we are running this year on November 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And today we are going to talk about how to lead your brand in today's turbulent environment. I'd like to just get started with the basics in terms of what is a brand, so that we are all on the same page. The way I look at brands is that they are basically an image in the mind of consumers, but they're also an experience that the company really provides to the consumers. And that experience is, of course, provided through all sorts of media, through all sorts of environments. It's provided in a retail store or in a supermarket. It's provided, of course, online. The experience is also provided nowadays increasingly on mobile media. So there are all sorts of touch points that are used for creating an experience. And the ultimate goal of branding is, of course, not just to create an image in the mind and an experience, but to have some positive impact on business. And what we found in branding over many, many years is that if you get customers to be happy and loyal to the brand, that will really help you also to increase the financial performance, because happy and loyal customers are likely to buy your products again, and they are recommending them to other customers. So they are a great financial asset. And brands are, of course, also looked at as financial assets. But nowadays, in today's turbulent environments, it is not always clear exactly how you can create that asset and further enhance it. And that is what I'm going to talk about for the next 20-30 minutes with you all. Okay. I've written a lot of books on that particular topic. For example, I've written on experience, on experiential marketing and the customer experience, but also about bigger strategic issues of branding, as well as on this issue that I just mentioned, how do you make customers happy. Most recently, I wrote also a book about Asian customers and Asian markets and brands that are coming up from Asia and that are successful and struggling in Asia. So my books usually feature all sorts of companies. It can be fast-moving consumer goods companies like Procter & Gamble and Unilever, can be technology companies like Apple and Samsung, retail brands, of course, all sorts of retail brands in the fashion business, in the luxury business, services, anything ranging from insurance and financial services to hospitality and internet services. And of course also lots of B2B examples you would find in those books that focus on the core issues of branding, how to create an experience for customers, how to make customers happy. So we only have 20-30 minutes together today, but if you're interested in any further insights about branding, I do recommend that you take a look at some of the books that I've written over the last few years, and here you have a selective list of those publications. Now, I just mentioned that branding happens, of course, in all sorts of environments, and there are all sorts of brands. But what is also happening is that brands are increasingly being challenged, especially over the last few years. And what is sort of happening is that nowadays you may get new competitors coming up really, really fast. Of course, in a major way in the digital space, with new brands that we've seen to come from almost from nowhere, as I mean, basically being startups and then being one of the major leading brands globally. Google, Facebook are good examples. Of course, Alibaba is a fantastic example that is all on our minds these days. What we also see is that some brands are really, really hot for a while, and then they may suddenly be out of customers' favor. Over the last year, we've seen a cinnamon-flavored whiskey called Fireball being really, really successful. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. We will see whether that success will stay and whether we will have a more lasting brand. We also see that more and more brands are coming from emerging markets, from Asian markets, from Latin American markets. We see major brands coming and challenging some of the established players that we have here in the United States and in Europe, and that operate as global brands and on a global scale. So all of these are sort of challenges, and if you look at it a little bit more generally, digitization as one of the challenges is of course going to stay. In fact, it will intensify. We've seen over the last 10-15 years lots of new digital businesses being created. We've seen that all businesses are going on digital platforms. So this will stay, and it will further intensify as the Internet of Things will be coming next as a major trend, as we will have all sorts of smart devices that will be connected via the Internet. Big data will become a major issue for understanding brands and for understanding all the different customer touch points that brands have with their customers. Media fragmentation is also likely to stay. The time of the traditional mass media communications is definitely over. They are still important, especially for certain kinds of brands, and especially when we want to build a global brand, you still need, of course, mass media advertising in many categories, not in all. But increasingly, you also need to look at smaller media, all sorts of different media, and there's an opportunity there. It's not just a challenge, because it may help you to really define your customer segment very, very sharply, or not even go by segments, but by customers as individuals, by using a customized strategy and using the appropriate customized media for each one of your target customers. Global competition is also going to stay. I mentioned Alibaba. We may see a competition coming between Amazon and Alibaba. Amazon, major US brand in the B2C business primarily, Alibaba in the B2B business, but also with some other brands in the B2C space. So we will be seeing, I think, an intensification of these global competitions. So looking at those three challenges, broadly speaking, what does all of this mean for brands? Now, my view on this is that we really need a certain approach, and that approach focuses on what I call the bizz and the buzz, bringing that together, a bizz and a buzz mindset. What do I mean by this? Well, by bizz mindset, I mean to do what we have as the established procedures of doing business. Bizz has a lot to do with strategy and with planning, but that alone will not get us to be successful given those challenges. We also need the buzz and the buzz is more associated with innovation. It's associated with speed. So when you're reading, for example, articles on branding and taking into account these challenges, you will very often find an argument that, well, but we should still go on with the usual strategic planning process because certain things have not changed. Brands will always be about, the argument goes, emotional connection. Agencies will argue brands will always be about storytelling. Others will argue that brands will always be about creating value for customers, and that is true. So we need to use the established principles that we have, the established strategic planning principles about how we create emotional connections, how we can tell stories, and also how we create value for customers. That's very, very important, but at the same time, how we do this may be very, very different. How we tell stories today, the media, the channels that we are using are very, very different. We maybe have to tell different stories if we are putting our brand in a global competitive environment. So we need the biz, but we also need the buzz at the same time. Biz, in a way, also refers to the more rational, analytical side, and that is very important in branding. You have it in issues of brand valuations, if you want to know the financial value of your brand. You have it when you're thinking about brand positioning. There are very analytical techniques for doing this, market research techniques like perceptual maps and so on. Big data in and of itself, which is very important for the future of branding, is a very rational, analytical procedure. But at the same time, branding, and perhaps more than other parts of business, also has a major creative side. And by creative side, I don't just mean copywriting in communication firms, but by creative, I also mean the way we do our customer connections, the way we do our customer relationship management, the way we are running events, the way we are using media and media initiatives, and how we make media choices. All of this also needs to be differentiating. It needs to be creative. And that requires that we are really sometimes going beyond the pure strategic planning considerations that we have in planning by also incorporating the innovative side of branding. So that is my broad-based view on how to deal with those challenges of digitization, media fragmentation, global competition, and others that we are facing. And let me now give you like three approaches or tools, perspectives that I feel are particularly relevant given those challenges, and that I think nicely illustrate this biz and buzz that is needed to be successful in branding today. The first one is outside industry benchmarking, bringing the best ideas from anywhere to your brand. Most companies engage in benchmarking, in fact engage in lots of benchmarking, but a lot of that benchmarking is usually done within the industry. So you might be looking at the number one brand in your industry. You may be looking at an immediate competitor that has done relatively well recently, and that is all fine. But I feel the best ideas, and especially in these turbulent environments where you may need new ideas, the best ideas often come from businesses that are not in your industry. For example, if you are a car manufacturer and you want to improve services at the dealership, and as you know, that's been a major issue for car manufacturers for many, many years, because the satisfaction ratings of consumers, especially for car manufacturers and dealer services, are not particularly high. And you may learn something from the hospitality business, from hotels or from private clubs. You may also learn something from airlines. You may learn something from other service businesses, and then you may take those ideas and use them for your business. I have been involved in a project for a cosmetics firm where we were benchmarking new ingredients that could be used as part of the formula of moisturizers or soaps and other beauty products. There we looked at supermarkets. We looked at innovative supermarkets like Whole Foods, for example, and we said, what kind of ingredients do we find nowadays in snacks or in energy bars or in smoothies, in fruit, in drinks and so on. So there we looked at the kinds of fruits, the kind of green tea or herbs that you may find in those kinds of products and how that might be useful for creating innovations in the beauty and cosmetics business. I've also been involved in a project for a telecom company where we looked at the retail environment, for example, very broadly speaking, not only other technology companies and their retail presence, but way beyond this. We looked at fast fashion for creative ideas. We looked, of course, also at e-commerce providers for the kind of web presence and web design and web architecture that we could use for this telecom company. So outside industry benchmarking is absolutely critical, that you are looking outside the organization and not just at your competitors, not just at other players in your industry, but pretty much anybody where there might be some useful ideas. When you do this, you need to make a few decisions. You need to decide what issues to benchmark. Is it service? Is it your customer relationship management? Is it supposed to be for new product development? So a very important decision is what exactly you're going to look at. The next step, the next decision is which industries and brands you're going to benchmark. The first decision probably, which issue will lead you to certain industries, will lead you to certain brands. And then you have to, as a third decision, apply these ideas to your own brand. And applying really means looking at it from your perspective, from your business, how these ideas could be used. It's not just about stealing the ideas and copying them one by one, but you need to exercise some creativity as well in applying those ideas to your brand. This is often best done as part of cross-disciplinary teams. It's usually not good if you're just putting one team in charge, but the moment when you want to apply those ideas from another business to your own brand, you really need to involve lots of different people within your organization. So outside industry benchmarking, I think, nicely illustrates the biz and the buzz, because we are looking at some of the procedures, some of the strategies, some of the approaches that are being used outside your industry, but then in a creative way, we are applying these ideas to your business. Another one is, of course, talked about a lot today, which is omni-channel strategy, which is the idea of using all touch points to create a unique experience for customers. The idea of omni-channel, or of integrating different channels or different media, has been around for a long, long time. If you think back to the age of advertising being the dominant medium, there was always an attempt to integrate the TV, the print, and the outdoor, for example. 10, 15 years ago, there was a lot of talk about integrated marketing communications. And what that meant at that point was integrating not only TV, print, and outdoor, but looking at it more broadly, also PR, for example, and then, of course, the web presence of the organization as soon as the internet became very widespread. But nowadays, it's even going way beyond this. It's really, truly the integration across all touch points. Mobile is a major, major one here, and that is what companies are striving for. Frankly speaking, right now, I think this is a goal. It's a mandate to integrate all of these different touch points rather than a reality. When you're looking at some companies that are doing it quite well, such as Starbucks, who I would say is a leader in the omni-channel strategy, you still see just, you would say, certain parts of channels connected with other parts of channels. Starbucks has been very innovative in terms of sourcing ideas, for example, from its Starbucks users online. Starbucks has also been very innovative in a mobile wallet, in being able to pay with your smartphone, for example, in the stores, and then, of course, to track your purchases online. So we see some of that integration, but it's not a full integration yet. And I don't think any company has achieved such a full integration across all touch points. What is important when you strive to do that is, again, that you're focusing on three decisions that will determine the ultimate outcome and the ultimate success of your omni-channel strategy. Number one, remember, the point of it is that you integrate the touch points to create a unique experience for your customers. So a key question to ask is, well, what should that experience be? What is the experience that you really want to deliver at every single touch point? Very often companies just worry about integrating all the different channels, but what should be the point of this integration? What should be the key message of that integration? What is the story that is supposed to underline that integration? The second decision is how to use each channel for reinforcing the experience that you have defined and that you have selected. And the last decision that is critical is then how you integrate the brand across all of these different channels. So you need to think about omni-channel strategy strategically and analytically, but then also, of course, do creative initiative at each one of those channels. It's again an example of integrating the biz and the buzz in this turbulent environment that we are all facing. The last illustration I'd like to give of the biz and the buzz and how it comes together in a turbulent environment and what is needed is what I like to call global identity management. The idea of managing the identity, the image of the brand and the experience on a global scale. On a global scale. And this is, of course, a huge, huge challenge. We know from the marketing textbooks, the traditional marketing textbooks, we know the numerous examples of brands that have not done with certain names, with certain logos, with certain colors, with certain styles in certain markets because they did not consider the preferences of consumers in those markets. We have heard all of these sorts of stories. We know that it is not easy to do that because we are nowadays dealing with so many different cultures, with so many different markets, with so many different languages. And the brand is ultimately about, the names and logos and styles, and it is about the language and the slogans and all of this that we are using in conjunction with a product. So this is a major, major challenge. So how can you approach this particular challenge? Well, one decision that you have to make is what brand elements you need to standardize and which ones you want to localize. And this is not just only about names and logos, it can also be a broader approach in terms of the messages that you're using. For example, in some markets it may be quite beneficial to use what is usually referred to as functional or utilitarian messages, really focusing your brand very closely on what it delivers, on the value that it delivers, on the product features, on the product benefits. But in other markets, it is often to the benefit of the campaign to focus more on the experiential or hedonic elements, to focus more on the emotions and the experiential elements that you find in communications. I've done a study recently with a colleague of mine at Columbia Business School. Here at Columbia Business School, Professor Kamel Jadidi. We had a data set from 20 plus countries around the world. We had numerous campaigns and marketing approaches by a widely diversified consumer goods company. And we looked, for example, at lots of different issues. And one of the issues was, should we use functional or experiential communications in different markets? And one of the findings was that in emerging markets where consumers have not as much learned yet about marketplaces, the emerging markets that you have in Asia, in India, in China, in Indonesia, for example, the emerging markets that you have in Latin America, the emerging markets that are now coming up in Africa, there you actually want to use more of a functional approach, whereas in the developed markets, in the United States and in Europe, as well as Japan and some of the developed markets in Asia, Hong Kong, Singapore, we had now a sample. You really want to focus more on the experiential and on the emotional elements for the same product. In fact, sometimes for the same brand. So what this shows is that in terms of standardization and localization, you need to be really very, very clear about which brand elements you want to standardize, use the same, use a global appeal. And that global appeal may be, for example, an emotional campaign, as many advertising agencies are nowadays creating it. Or you may want to use more of a local appeal. The second key decision is which products to standardize and localize. Can you actually use the exact same product form in all different markets? In services, it is easier to localize things because services in and of themselves are not tangible. But for consumer goods, it's usually a major undertaking, and it leads to additional costs. There's also the question which product you actually use in which particular markets. And these decisions ultimately are organizational internal decisions again, because it refers to also how the organization operates. Is it working based on a centralization approach, or is it more decentralized? So these are three of the areas and tools and frameworks where this turbulent environment plays out. I could only give you snippets in this 20-25 minutes that I've been presenting my ideas to you. But I'd like to conclude by saying here at the Center on Global Brand Leadership at Columbia Business School, we have developed an executive brand leadership model that covers those issues that are at the bizz and the buzz, and more. So it looks, for example, at issues that relate to where your brand currently stands. We are doing a full assessment of your brand. Then we are helping you with the planning and strategy of the of the brand with respect to the brand positioning, for example, or the brand core, or with respect to individual elements like names and logos and nomenclature and symbols and so on. And then we're also bringing into this executive brand leadership model, of course, the creative elements that I was talking about, the buzz, issues of experience, issues of emotions. So this is a full-fledged model that we have used in our work with companies, and this, Jason, is also actually a model that we are using in a major way in the executive program on brand leadership that we are running in November. So thank you very much.
Professor Schmitt, this is a really fascinating presentation. I think gives us a lot to think about as we consider everything we've learned today and this in the context of the program. I want to invite you, I see some people are already asking questions, so I want to invite you to ask questions with the few minutes we have left. I'm just going to provide you with a link here to the program. So if you're interested in the program, I've just put the link in the chat. We can, you can go there and inquire, learn more about the program. Professor Schmitt, I do want to go back for a minute to the great example you used of the beauty products and Whole Foods and bringing ideas together. And that reminds me of something that happens in your program, which is this sort of using New York City as a learning laboratory, which really is a very experiential idea of going to Times Square and
exactly,
Tell us
Jason.
about how do we leverage New York?
Right. I mean, I talked about outside industry benchmarking, and what you just mentioned are examples of how in the program we are doing outside industry benchmarking. Okay. Because we will have participants, and some of them will be coming from the retail business, but many of them may not. But it will be very useful for especially those that are not in the retail business to take a look, for example, at some new stores that you have in New York. And New York is, of course, known for always having the latest stores, the latest retail presence. We will also be going to Times Square. So there you're not learning about the stores, but there you're learning about how you can create a wow impression through these huge billboards that we have. Now, so what we are doing is, in a way, outside industry benchmarking. We are looking at companies that have done a great job. For example, at Times Square, we are looking at retailers that have done a great job in their retail presence, and that is sort of the creative part. But we are also analyzing, of course, why they are successful. So we would be looking at the numbers. We would be looking at are there new approaches? How could you measure them? In fact, one of the exercises that we'll have in the executive program is this: when we are going into these stores, I will give everybody a scoring sheet so that they can assess anything from the interior design of the store to the service that's going on there. So that service element is extremely relevant for anybody who's in a service business, whether it's B2C or whether it's B2B.
So tell me, actually, so we're all having this experience, we're doing some scoring, and that makes me think about just the format of the program. How much is it interactive in talking with your peers and coupled with lecture and that kind of thing?
Sure. I mean, there's no lecture, no one-way lecture at all. There is lecture discussions. Of course, we will be providing ideas and concepts. I mean, we will basically go through the executive brand leadership model, idea by idea. We'll be discussing that with the participants. Then there will be exercises, okay, related to their specific issues. So we will ask people before they join the program to share with us issues that they have in the company. In fact, we will be providing a free audit of their brand, an assessment of where the brand is strong and where the brand can be improved. And we will be working on those brand audits and those issues that the participants have as part of the program. And then there are all these experiential learning elements, like going to Times Square, going to the stores, even when we go to a restaurant, okay, which we will be doing one of the evenings. There will be a learning opportunity there as well, because a restaurant is a brand, and a restaurant is an experience. So we're really trying to integrate all these different elements that you have in branding, the strategic, the creative, the measurement, the planning, working alone and with groups into this program. And we are trying to leverage, of course, the unique destination, a place where we are holding this program, which is New York City.
Tell me just a little bit more about the brand audit. What's involved in that? That's something that we're as part of the program. It happens in advance, so folks get that on day one or beforehand.
Right. I mean, what we found in working with companies is that there are certain dimensions that are critical for the success of a brand. And so we will be asking participants to assess their brand on those dimensions. Now, they may do this based on their expertise. They may also do this based on research that they have within the organization. And it will be anything, whether it's with respect to the positioning, whether the positioning is sharp enough, and whether it is a competitive positioning relative to the other players in the market. It will be with respect to the experience that's provided for customers. Is it a differentiating experience? Is it an experience that is attractive, that resonates with customers? It will be also with respect to some of the issues we've not talked about today at all, such as the portfolio of the brand. Many companies don't just have one brand, but there are lots of different brands that are part of the organization. So as part of the audit, we would assess whether all of these brands are needed or not, and how can they best be leveraged. So that is what we will ask people to do in the brand audit, and we will share the results with them, discuss the results with them, and then give them for the program a guidance in terms of how they can use the individual sessions that we have in the program in order to improve their brand.
Thank you. We're just about out of time, so I've got one more question. Before I get to that, I just want to let folks know we'll send you the recording at the end of this, so you can go back and review what we've talked about. And also, when you get the recording, if you're listening and you have a question, or if there's something we're not getting to, please go ahead and email us. We'd be happy to continue this conversation with you. We are running low on time here, but definitely don't want to stop your questions. So continue to send us questions after we send out the recording to you. Professor Schmitt, I do want to ask, so we've got the program coming up in November. I'm there for 3 days. I get all these great ideas, great experiences. My mind is going. I go back to the office. What are the outcomes? What do you expect to? What should I, as a participant, expect to bring back to my?
Well, it's as a professor, it's always flattering if you can give people new ideas and big ideas, and they enjoy the program, and I can assure you they will have fun because of these elements, not just because of the content, but because of these experiential elements in New York that I mentioned to you. But the ultimate goal is, of course, not just to get intellectual stimulation, but the ultimate goal is to improve your business, and in this case, to really have something tangible that you can work on the minute you go back to your business. And that's the goal. And I think it's again linked to the audit, because in the beginning you're assessing your brand. Now you have learned how to improve it, and we will have worked with participants on the specific issues where the brand currently falls short. And I guess the job then is, once you go back to work, is to work on those issues and to get your team on those issues. And that is really the idea of this program, right? You do some work on it beforehand, then you come for 3 days, and then you go back, and then you're ready to go and ready to run with a new implementation, or maybe even more broadly speaking, with a new strategic approach for your brand.
Nice. Professor Schmitt, thank you again so much. It's a really great half hour. I can see a lot of folks enjoyed it, and I just provided the link again in the chat, so you can go to the program website, learn more about that program and others. And we do want to thank all of you for being here. What a great audience from all over the world we had joining us today. We will be sending you the recording. Again, just because we're leaving you right now, don't let that stop the conversation. Please email us or connect with us on LinkedIn or on Facebook, and continue the conversation, ask questions. We'll be sure to respond to you. Professor Schmitt, thank you again.
Thank you, Jason, for having me.
Yes, of course. It's been a pleasure. And thanks to all of you. We look forward to seeing you at another webinar, one of our online programs, or, of course, here at the Columbia University campus in New York City.